Here we go. Hello, everyone. Hello, Furality Aqua. In real life, I am Rod O'Reilly, and he is one of two old furry fans.
Yes, I am Mark Merlino in real life, and this is my partner, Rod O'Reilly, and we call ourselves Two Old Furry Fans on our website. And we also do presentations at conventions as Two Old Furry Fans. Today, we were lucky enough to get Rodney set up in VR so he could be with me. So both of us are here. My persona name is Sylys Sable. This avatar is Sy the Skilled Hare, which is a creature I created for the co-mascot of the Cartoon Fantasy Organization, which turned out to be the first Japanese animation fan club in the United States. And I had invented these skilled hare critters when I was in high school for science fiction stories I was working on. They are a weasel-like alien, have antenna, based on otters and pine martens. So this is kind of a pre-fursona for me. This is Sy the Skilled Hare. My partner was Fanta, so Fanta Sy, Fantasy, that's the two mascots. But the Skilled Hare became very important because that is how I met Rodney. So why don't you tell that little story real quickly?
Oh, yes. Basically, I had been going to science fiction conventions with my high school science fiction club for a while. One of the first ones we all went to together was called LostCon 7, the Los Angeles area regional science fiction convention. 1980, LostCon 7 happened to move to Anaheim near where my player lives. And it was the first convention I'd ever been to with an art show. And I loved it. And quick background, if you haven't noticed, we have this weasel thing. Both of us grew up with this weasel thing. We both really, really love Mustelidae, okay, of all sorts. I read an incredible book called Fur and Fury. I recommend it to everybody out there, okay? Fur and Fury. Great, great background on lots and lots and lots of weasel species. So I love that book, and I learned about these things called pine martens, which are not a really famous species. They're not one of the zeitgeist species that everybody knows about, but I learned about them. So I'm walking through this art show, and here are these cartoon pictures of these alien pine martens with antennas. And I said, whoa, ran up to the guy who was running the art show and said, who does this art? And he said, oh, it's the guy who's running our Japanese animation video room. So I went up to the guy in the Japanese animation video room, said, you're running the room? He said, yes. I said, that's your artwork? He said, yes. I said, why do your pine martens have antenna?
And I said, sit down and I'll explain it to you. And the rest is history. That was 41 years ago. And basically, we went to science fiction conventions, and at one point in 1985, our friends who had a very nice room said, hey, why don't you guys throw a room party? Room parties, of course, happen at conventions after the programming kind of winds down. And I said, well, what do we do for a room party? He goes, well, get your videotapes out, your giant U-matic videotapes, because Betamaxes really weren't around, and neither were VHS at the time. And show that show Animal Olympics you got, and show your Warner Brothers cartoons that you did, and drag out all that cool art you have of animal characters and call your room party the Prancing Skill Tear Party, which was the name of our house. So we did that, and it was an open party. Anybody could come in, and we started getting people showing up that were artists, and they had sketchbooks, and they said, wow, we didn't know anybody else was into animal characters like this. Look at this art I did. And we'd show them art we did, and friends like Ken Sample in New York, who was running the CFO chapter in New York at the time, or was involved in it. And we would trade art in the mail. That's how furry art got around back then, is people would mail it to each other. And if they went to a science fiction convention or a comic convention, they'd have Xerox parties where they'd all go out to Kinko's and copy each other's art.
Anybody remember
Kinko's? The only way you could get it. Yes. So that was the first party. And after that, we thought, yeah, this was fun, so we're going to keep having these parties. We would make posters and hang them up around the convention to announce the party. And after about the third party, one of our regular Southern California, actually Bay Area people named Carl, approached us and said, hey, how about I start a newsletter? We'll get everybody's contact information and we'll start a newsletter so we can keep in contact with each other. And that became Furversion, which was the first furry fanzine.
You should
that anybody
tell them
could
about the
contribute
difference
to.
between.
Yeah. Oh, appas and fanzines. Yeah.
Yes.
Some of you may have heard about funny animal appazines, APA. That means Amateur Publishing Association. What those are like a closed club of people who are artists or writers or whatever, and they basically contribute to the APA by making a number of copies. The number of copies to the number of members, they get sent to a central location. They're collated into a magazine and mailed back out. So this is the way the funny animal artists kept in touch with each other. The next issue would come out. They would have their contribution and a page of comments on the last issue. And the first one dedicated to funny animals came out of Minneapolis, where Minicon was the big science fiction convention up there. Ken Fletcher and Reed Waller got together to start it. And several other famous furry artists, like Tarl Wayne, contributed to it. And famously, Tarl Wayne sent a note to Ken saying, why isn't there more adult content in funny animals? So that was way back in the 70s when that happened. That magazine lasted, I think, about 4 years. And then Fred Patton and Mark Schurmeister, actually Mark Schurmeister, a cartoonist in Los Angeles, took over with an APA called Reprise, which I believe is still being produced. It had ended up with about 50 members, and people were making, 20, 30-page contributions. So the thing ended up the size of a telephone book, for those who remember what telephone books are.
Told you we're old.
Rod and I continued every con we could get to, including 2 conventions in the UK. For the World Science Fiction Convention, we continued to have our room parties. And along with that, anime had gotten really big in science fiction and comic fandom. And the anime groups were putting on screening rooms and even providing translations of the shows in book form as a giveaway. It was really great. But Baycon,
because his club had started becoming big in colleges.
yeah, there was an anime group in almost every college around the United States and probably overseas too. At that point, some of the people running the local Bay Area convention, Baycon, where we'd have some of the biggest furry parties we ever had, said, "Hey, you anime people are doing a great job of taking over all of our function space. Wouldn't it be better if you had your own conventions?" So the anime people in the Bay Area said, "Yeah, okay, we'll do that." And the next year they had an anime convention, the very first anime convention. That was 1989, I think. And I said to Rodney, being not of sound mind, "Do you think that we could have a furry convention, a convention just for furries?" And
Actually,
both of us being insane,
the anime,
yeah.
sorry,
Go ahead.
the anime convention I think was in '88 because ours was January of '89.
Okay,
I think.
because I remember it was Baycon '88 where most of this conversation happened. So I guess they had it the same year. That's pretty fast, actually.
Yeah, may have been secret
both of
plans
us,
before then.
having been to science fiction conventions, having helped out with them, we still were not. We're still crazy enough to say, "Yeah, we'll try our own convention." And so in 1988, we planned a convention, checked out hotels, found when we could afford the function space on. We couldn't get a room block because we had no idea people would show up and check in for the night. And in Costa Mesa, California, at a little Holiday Inn, we had Conference 0. And I guess 100 people registered by mail, sending us like $5 for what they call a supporting membership, which is the way science fiction cons work. And you convert that to the door. I think we were charging $10 for the weekend. And we had 65 people show up, and we went, "Hey, it kind of worked." So that's how furry cons began. And we continued to have conventions. Go ahead.
No.
Oh, we had conventions and about doubled our attendance every year. In 1983, by that time, the text-based role-playing community called Furry Month had become a thing. It ran on a computer at a university on the East Coast, and you could dial in with a terminal, with an ASCII terminal and a modem, and you could text your actions and your character descriptions and your building, whatever, all text-based like an adventure game. And it got pretty big. So Rod and I got online and promoted our convention. And in 1993, the same year that AOL opened their membership to the actual internet, because before then they were a closed shop, we had a lot of people show up at our convention who met on Furry Muck, some from across the country, all because they wanted to meet each other in person at our convention. And it just got bigger from there. So now look what we have. We have a virtual furry convention. And it's huge. Lots of people registered for this. So I'm going to give Vincent a chance to fill some stuff in, and then we'll start taking questions, which is really what this is all about.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Hi, Changa. Okay, I'm going to finish a thought that he started earlier about, he was talking about apazines. What Carl did was he created a fanzine, and fanzines are different from appas because fanzines, you just have an editor who makes copies and then sells them. So anybody can get one. That was new. There had never been one of those for Funny Animal or furries before that. And so that took off. And then some of the people who worked with him created a fanzine called Yarf, which lasted a real long time and became very famous. And a lot of artists started off there who became very big artists. People don't realize, but some of the early fanzines had not just people like Tarl Wayne and Reed Waller, who created Omaha the Cat Dancer, but Chris Sanders started in furry fanzines. He would go on to direct things like Lilo and Stitch and such. And Jerry Beck, who's a very big animation reviewer and critic, who was in charge of the International Animated Film Society in Los Angeles for a while, etc., so on and so forth. Stan Sakai. Stan Sakai started in furry fanzines, and we were the first people ever to see this little thing called Usagi Yojimbo. Okay, so humble
and that
beginnings.
was, of course, thanks to Steve Galacci's anthology comic.
Yes. Albedo. Everyone should know Steve Galacci. Everyone should know Steve Galacci because so much of this stuff. If you've seen the first off, we should find out how many people out there. I know we're muted, so just give an arm wave. How many people out there have seen the documentary called The Fandom? Anybody? There you go. Okay, a few.
So a
you're
lot
cheating,
of this you've
Changa.
heard in that. Yeah. That's Changa Husky over there, my other partner. Yes. And he's on the video staff for this convention.
But one of the things we talked about in there was 1980 Worldcon. There was a big, there was a big art show there too, and Steve Galacci put some of his furry art in the art show, and people were seeking him out, going, who is this guy? Who did this art? This guy put some of his art. By the way, this guy does art. He put some of his art in the show, and
oh
no, you did the posters. Yeah, you did the post, but Steve saw it and was interested in it. So there were gatherings in Steve Galacci's room about, everybody who was a fan of his stuff and wanted to talk to him about funny animal or furry stuff. But the difference is, get in those parties, you had to be invited by Steve himself. Okay? Our parties were weird because we threw open the doors and said, anybody, come in.
Yeah, back in Comic-Con in the late 80s, one of the CFO members won a hotel suite in a contest, and she let us use that for our open furry party. And down the hall, the Raw Brazzle party was happening, and the Raw Brazzle party was for members of the APA only. And it was really funny because one by one, the artists at the Raw Brazzle party drifted into our party and met a whole bunch of new artists they hadn't even heard of before. And a lot of those people ended up being the next members of Raw Brazzle when there was an opening. So that's how a fandom happens. You can have people who are fans of something, who contact each other, who, create together, share their creations, maybe they're looking at getting an actual job in the comic industry or in the animation industry or something. They're kind of working on a portfolio, or they're trying to do self-published stuff. But we thought the people who liked the stuff, who just, they weren't artists yet, or they probably would never be artists, but they just loved it, they should be invited to the parties too. Why not? And when you start having fans in your group, that's how you start a fandom. And even though we didn't really know much about, we knew about science fiction fandom and comic fandom because we'd run into it kind of individually, and we go to conventions. But we wanted to find as many people as we could who liked animal characters, anthros, whatever you want to call it, because we thought it was great, and we thought other people would like it too. So Rod and I were actually trying to get a fandom started. And it worked. It just took a while to gather steam, and luckily the internet came along, and now people could interact. There could be art forums, there could be discussion groups, there could be social media contact situations. And the fandom today, there's still probably thousands of furry fans who just keep in touch with each other over the internet, sell art, do commissions, and then some of them come to conventions, and some of them come to virtual conventions, but it's all one giant family.
We should talk about furry in general, because important safety tip. Both of us are of the very strong opinion, to put it shortly, that furries are not made, furries are born. People ask us, when did you first become a furry? I say, when I popped out of my mom. So I don't believe there's anything out there that makes someone a furry. There are things out there that make someone realize they're a furry. We've had a thing for a long time where he would take along his portfolios of art to conventions, and people would be flipping through them like, no, I don't, no, this isn't anything. I don't see. Whoa.
The art was the gateway. Back in the day, the art was the gateway. And the convention had a dealer's room. We had a dealer's room. First time we had, I think, 2 dealers in the dealer's room. And we had an art show that was all display art because nobody had any art to sell. But after that, the art shows became huge. The dealer's room was a little smaller than the art show, and we'd have 400 artists in the art show, because back then, if you wanted furry art, you had to buy originals or expensive prints, go to the art show and bid against each other to buy it. Now, of course, there's art all over the internet. Although the bigger conventions still have art shows. If you go to a live convention, don't miss the art show, because not only will you see some amazing work, but you'll be connecting to the origins of the fandom when you go to something like that.
BLFC was beautiful this year.
They had a great art show. And when we went to Midwest Fur Fest in 2019, they had a huge art show. It was great to see. They're hard to run. People running conventions will almost always, if they're just starting out, go, no art show, too much hassle. But the bigger conventions will do it. So let's see, 25. Yeah, we're getting to the point, I think, where we've done our introductions. And since when I like to answer questions, I like to get into a lot of detail. So let's start taking questions from the audience here and the Discord, with which Ari Bunny will help us with.
And also, we have this husky over here holding his hand up. There we go, Aribun. Hello, Aribun.
You need to stand on the starfish, Jenga.
Okay.
There you go. Now I can hear you.
Okay. Couple quick minor notes about
Yes?
the earlier appas you're talking about for version. For version is available online at conference.com, all scans. If you want to look at some of those earlier fanzines. And also interesting to note about for versions is it was also social media. If you look at some of those earlier appas, well, or not even appas, fanzines, they were full of names and addresses of people, and it was like a phone book for at least sections of it. The versions on conference.com, a lot of the addresses are blanked out, but but the pages are still there, and you would get the fanzine and, well, write to other people. Mail, what a concept. But but it also shows that even from the beginnings, we were always reaching out, like, and trying to socialize, right, like crazy, and that's amazing. And I will leave you.
Yeah, Changa put together the conference archive, conference.com/archive. He's scanned thousands of documents, not just from furry, but from science fiction conventions too, from back before the internet. And you can do your own, research and look at this stuff, the same stuff people would have seen, 40 years ago. Okay, Ari, got any questions for us? Well, this is kind of neat.
Yeah. Let me say my cliche at this point, okay? You've probably heard over the years people saying, I've never had it absolutely proven, but some people will tell you that Hollywood, the entertainment industry, isn't interested in you if you're an out furry fan, that will keep you from getting a job in the entertainment industry. And my statement has always been, if it is true that the entertainment industry will not take furry fans, then furry fans have no choice but to take it over.
Yes,
guess what?
And it does appear that that's happening.
Have you looked at Netflix lately? Okay.
Netflix lately, yeah. So yeah, I think that that it's come around and furry is becoming mainstream, mainly because there are people out there, creators out there, who understand that using animal characters to tell a story is the best way to do it, and that there's a market for it. People will subscribe to streaming services. They'll pay for theater tickets. They'll go and watch it. It's not just for kids. Animation is a medium. It's a way to make films. It's not just for kids. And if you watch a lot of these films, the humor goes way over the heads of most of the kids because the films are made by adults. But yeah, that's happening. Conventions are happening again now that the pandemic is not over, but we know more about it and how to control things. It's hard to say beyond that. I think there might be some advances in VR technology and AR technology. One of our roommates here suggested once that you could have an AR app on your phone, and when you held it up, people that you saw there would show up on your phone as their persona or as their character, which I think is an interesting idea. I think models, having a model, an actual 3D model of your persona is becoming more of a thing now, thanks to some websites like the Hero website, where you can make little D&D models of your persona. And there's a guy who comes to conventions sometimes that has a 3D scanner that scans fursuiters, and then he makes them into 3D printed models. That's a possibility. I think the convention scene is pretty solid. They're working hard to make conventions an all ages thing. So, people who have permission, who are under 18, or come with their parents, there's stuff for them to do. That the people with interest in adult content, there's things for them to do. It's separated. It's a safe area for everybody to enjoy it. That's happening more and more in conventions now. So I think that's what's going on with the future. Thank you for the question. It's a good question.
Next.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Does being, quote, unquote, Graymuzzle present any challenges while exploring the furry fandom today?
There is, yeah. I mean, if you are in the, if you happen to hang out on Twitter and pay attention to furry posts, you'll notice that there's always people who, and I think they pay for attention, who will make up problems. And one of them you see coming up a lot of times is what's called ageism. There are people who think, first of all, they believe the idea that furry is all about sex and all about grooming and all about chasing tail and all that kind of stuff. And they say if anybody in the fandom is over 30, the only reason they're in the fandom is to pursue underage people.
I'd rather pursue him.
Well, you kind of caught me, actually. This keeps getting brought up every time somebody thinks they need attention. They will bring this up again. The thing is, the fandom's been around for 40 years, so a lot of people who were under 18 when they got in it are now adults. And the people who are in it now who are under 18, in a few years, are going to be adults too. And unlike certain other fandoms, people don't generally leave the furry fandom. They stay in it. It becomes a very important part of their life. Otherwise, of course, health issues, trying to stay alive.
Something else, though, not so much a problem, but it's a problem for me, and I think it is a problem for you. There is, you can only do so much in any part of your life, in any fandom, for crying out loud. I have never been a gamer. I'm into a lot of fanish things. I'm into a lot of geeky things, but I have just never been a gamer. And so an awful lot of the conversation about games is so important, and it goes completely meow.
Yeah, I actually, on Reddit, I actually am, I actually subscribe to R Gaming, trying to keep up with what's going on with gaming, particularly if it involves furry characters or furry gamers. But I don't game myself. The only games I do are Second Life and VR Chat, pretty much, and they're not really games. But yeah, it's there's an age gap, but I don't think it's as big a problem in furry as it might be in other fandoms.
It's very helpful that there is such an active Graymuzzle community, I find. I like talking to fellow old farts, and Kits these days, I swear to God.
Yes.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you for the
question.
question.
Another question from Dr. Quickfix. What was it like being a furry before it got so big?
Well, most of my friends were in fandoms. The fandom was kind of my social life. So science fiction fandom, comic fandom, animation fandom. I didn't really go around and preach animal characters to other people I knew, but I didn't have an issue. I didn't have issues with it, but I know my friends who were actually trying to get into professional situations with their art did have some problems, like Rodney said. It was suggested by Sherbert in the documentary that production companies didn't like the idea of people sharing artwork. They considered artwork to be an intellectual property and didn't like the fact that people were trading art freely back and forth. There was also some of the early artists in the fandom were very much into underground cartoons, and their inspiration came from underground cartoons, which had lots of sex and drugs and social content. And would try to get into the animation industry, they'd bring their portfolios in and they'd be rejected because of the content. People weren't even looking at the art quality. They were just looking at the fact that, it was essentially underground comics, and the person was trying to get a job at like Disney or Deke or, Filmation or something like that. But, my family, a lot of people get into furry fandom when they're like teenagers. I was like 28. So my family said, whatever you want to do. Rodney?
I was going to say, let me try my first.
Whoops.
It's about fandom. 1977, Disney released The Rescuers, and simply put, I went insane. Okay, I adored that film in every way, but my family was living out in the boonies. My dad was a horse rancher, so we were living on a little ranch. None of my friends lived within a couple of miles of me, so I spent a lot of time myself. But here I was going crazy for this animated film, and I asked Dad, I was embarrassed to tell him that I was going crazy for a movie because I had to make fun of me. So I said, what do you do when you really like a book? And he said, read it over and over again. Well, you didn't have that option with a movie in the 70s. No one had been even videotape at that point. So it took me years to realize what I was doing. What I was doing was I wanted to have fandom. I didn't even know what a fandom was, but I wanted to have other people that I could sit down and talk about this thing I was into. So I guess to answer your question more directly, what was it like? It was kind of lonely because I didn't have people around me or to get in touch with people that I thought I could talk to about the things I wanted to talk to about. So I was so happy to run into this guy and start discovering, well, first just animation fandom, and then both discovered our furriness, and then it turned into fur fandom. Now I've got lots of people to talk to about, Minerva Mink and so on. Thank you for the question.
Yes, thank you for the question.
Another question from Alex Archer. He says, how is your relationship with the youngest new members of the furry fandom, and do you have any advice for them?
I think Rod and I host a party at our house, the Prancing Seal Tear. We've canceled some because of the we didn't have any in 2020 after March because of the pandemic. We've shifted most of our activities to the backyard now, so people are outside for most of the activities. But we have a lot of people. We have like 3 or 4 new people show up every month. A lot of them are high school students, art students, or they're artists in their own right that have gotten, they discovered their furries. And, we pretty much treat them as guests in our house like anybody else. At furry conventions, most furry conventions furry conventions are very much based on science fiction conventions. That's the model that we've all used for developing our own conventions. They sell underage memberships with very clearly marked badges. And for the most part, everyone respects the fact that there are underage people present. Right now, I don't have any, except for possibly on Twitter, followers on Twitter, and maybe some people on Telegram. I don't have a lot of friends who are under 18, but, I guess I'm kind of old school. Back in the day, when I was growing up, we had like the Boy Scout program, which was great for me. And you had, older leaders and adult leaders, and, we do events, we do charity things, we'd go camping, and it was great. I think that adults mentoring children is a good thing. And I think there has been a lot of paranoia and fear-mongering that's been going on, and it's gotten worse and worse thanks to social media, where anybody can say anything and repeat it over and over again. There is a place. There's a reason that young people should be communicating with older people. And there's a reason that older people should be communicating with younger people. It's a community, it's a village. Go ahead.
Well, on the other angle, of course, something I don't think we ever, it's obvious it was going to happen, but something I don't think we ever thought about back in the day was all this Graymuzzle furry parents. There are now lots of furry parents. There are 3rd generation furry fans out there.
Yes.
So, people whove been there. Talk to people your age whose parents are furry and see what happens.
Yeah. You're kind of breaking up there, Vince, and you might want to speak a little slower.
Sorry.
Just warning you. Just letting you know. Well, no, it's your connection problems, unfortunately. Yeah, thank you for the question. I hope I answered it okay.
Here's
the question back there. Come on forward and stand down here by the starfish.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I saw you last time, and I didn't know shit about the furry fandom. And then you taught me a bunch, and I got another question for you, since you, you seem to have more knowledge on this. Is there any media or like pieces of like the furry fandom that is like disappeared that you wish was around anymore, or has everything been reserved, or am I just tripping? Because I feel like every fandom has its own like stuff that disappears that's not around anymore. I want to know what was your take on that?
Yeah, there's some stuff. There are people actively trying to archive it. We have the site conference.com archive that Changa produced. That stuff would be gone. Nobody would be able to see that if he hadn't scanned it all in and put it up on the web. Rodney has a huge collection of furry comics, not just ones made by furries, but furry-themed comics that are mainstream. And there are people working on similar collections. Possibly they'll eventually be scanned and put online. But yeah, I think probably the stuff that is kind of lost is, thousands and thousands of pages of role play and creativity on the text-based furry sites like Furry Muck and Tapestries and places like that. Some of those are still up and operating. That stuff may be lost. I mean, I have a huge stack of printouts of our storyboard on our BBS that was operating in 2000 or in 1984, and I have really no way to scan it where it'd be legible. But that kind of stuff is kind of becoming obscure. Luckily, there are furry writing sites where a lot of the early furry fanfic and also original creativity, original fiction is being preserved. So, yeah, we need to do more of that because we could lose some of this stuff forever. The good point. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Come on, step forward. I can't see your name. Urgent? There we go. Corp.
Yes.
Corpse Hunter. Yes.
Yes, thank you. I actually had a question. Today's furries, we have to deal with people constantly like badgering us about being furries. Did you have to deal with that as well?
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, our biggest problem occurred. Remember, I told you about in 1993, we had a lot of people from the mucks who were college students showing up. A lot of them were LGBT plus. And some of the early members of our fandom, it was not very many, very few people were upset about this. It was the AIDS crisis was a thing. And a lot of furry art was pinup art, basically bunny girls and, sexy does and sexy horses and whatever else. Very much, underground or cartoony stuff. And people were fans of it. All of a sudden, there were artists coming into the community doing sexy male pinups. And a few people just couldn't handle it. They're going, okay, we should have closed the doors before these people came into the fandom, and now the fandom's going gay, and this is wrong, this shouldn't be happening. And it even got to the point where Rod and I got blamed for this. We took this wholesome funny animal fandom, which, by the way, didn't exist because there wasn't a funny animal fandom yet. Furry fandom happened, and it's like, oh, all this gay stuff is their fault. So yeah, that was a problem. And that there are echoes of that are still going on. And the same people who didn't like what was happening were trying to figure out ways to sabotage our conventions. And they're still doing it to this day. So, yeah, that's a problem. As far as the media goes, the media doesn't care about what's true about the fandom. They just like what's weird about it because it gets eyeballs. People go, oh, this is really interesting. Look at these weirdos. So you can't really depend on the media. Everything else is just this game people play about I can get attention by hating something or hating someone. And other people go, ooh, I want to be on that bandwagon because that person got attention, so I will hate the same thing too. I'll tell you, it used to be a lot worse because there was a time when anybody involved in any fandom was a target. Comic fans, science fiction fans, anime fans were all looked down upon. What's happened is, thanks to the same social media on the internet and things like blogs and streaming services and things like that, this stuff has become so common now that people go, hey, it's completely okay to be a fan of something. Completely okay to have a hobby that you like comics and whatever. Nothing wrong with that, you know. Geeks are fine. Nerds are fine. You know, they're cool. And that has made things a lot better for furries, too. Politically, unfortunately, furries are a small group compared to the rest of the world. That makes us a popular target for someone with political aspirations. And that's something new that's getting a little bit worse for us. So it's kind of unfortunate. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you said it all. We're coming up on our time, so we should probably try to wrap up. I think,
yes,
at least for the people on
it's all
camera.
0. But thank you very much for your questions, and I hope we didn't talk your ear off here too much. And I'm really glad that Vincent could join us. That's
And then
really cool.
one last question.
Hard to hug in this thing. Yeah, that's right.
Yes, hug.
Kind of end up merging with each other. So
One last
people
question.
can stay after
Typical.
after the stream shuts down if they want to talk to us, and I will be looking at the Discord and answering questions too. So thank you for attending, and thank you for coming to Furality. It's one of my favorite conventions, and I hope it becomes yours too.